And the commissioner joins us again on Sikkim 365 Radio, 365 Sports on this very cold and frigid day in Texas and among other places around the country. Bob, thanks for your time. We do appreciate it. How much does the college football expansion delay affect in any way, one way or the other, the Big 12?
Well, first of all, let me say that this is my second ice storm of the winter, and I thought I got out of this when I left Iowa. But notwithstanding that, the CFP, there isn't any other way to say it. I've been frustrated, and I think the long and the short of it is if you don't want to do something, one excuse is as good as another. And I'm not real happy with where we landed, but it is what it is. And I think the playoff will expand. The silly part of this is that, another 12 months from now, or maybe 15 months from now, we're going to have to re-engage on these very same issues. And so it's not like we've solved anything, and I don't think we're going to find a period of real calm waters in the future. And so, there were those who thought it was just a terrible time to expand the playoff, and I disagree with that, mostly because I'm skeptical that we are headed for a period of calm water. I think we're going to continue to have student-athlete advocacy people. I think there are going to be continued court cases. I think there are going to be continued litigation. There's going to be continued interest by elected officials. And so, we're going to have to go right back to this again in a very short period of time. And we'll be on the clock that time because, when we get through the next 4 playoff games, we don't have a playoff after that.
Why not, even if you said, okay, the conferences can agree, we don't have enough ducks in the row to do this next year or a year from now or a year from that. But why don't we go ahead and say that here's the playoff going forward? Wouldn't that have been productive if you couldn't get it done for 2 years, at least get it done 4 years from now?
That would have been just fine if they'd have agreed that, we're not gonna capture the extra $450 million in years 11 and 12, but this is going to be the model going forward. We actually spent some time talking about that, and there were still objections and still concerns and still assertions that it wasn't the right time or we hadn't satisfactorily taken into account certain people's interests. And so, it's a fair question. It's the essence of my frustration, but I don't have the prerogative to stay frustrated. We have to go about the process of working through it. And now we're going to delay it for a while and then we're going to have to work through it. Then we're going to be on the clock.
Bob, how much does the voting bloc or that alliance, so to speak, make things more difficult in terms of voting?
Well, not really very much. They each have their own reasons. Each of their reasons are different, and so I don't see them as a voting bloc. They do have some business relationships together, just as we do with the SEC on the Sugar Bowl. So they do have some things where they have similar interests, but in this particular case, each of their objections are different from the others, and so I don't know that they're acting in concert on this occasion.
There is talk about when you do add Brigham Young and then the other 3 from the American Conference, or whenever the timeline eventually of what happens with Texas and Oklahoma, regardless of that, are you wanting divisions or do you want the top 2 teams to play for a championship in football?
Well, it doesn't matter what I want. It matters what our athletic directors want to put in place, and they're going to listen to our football coaches as well. And, they'll ask me for my opinion at some point in time, but it's really an athletic director's decision. And there are strengths and weaknesses of any model. We've talked about the number of games, whether or not we want to stay at 9 or want to drop down and play 8 games and have 4 non-conference games. We've talked about divisions. We've talked about in some sports we might not play divisions. In other sports we we may very well play division. So we have half a dozen subgroups of our athletics directors and our basketball operations, football operations folks that are working on those topics now, and eventually we're little by little we're snapping in the new members and getting them started so that we hear what their thoughts are on it. But I don't have any doubt we'll come to a conclusion on it, and we typically announce our football season's about a year ahead of time. Usually it's in October, and I don't see us having any problem meeting that deadline coming to this year. But there are still a lot of decisions to be made.
Do you think that every conference has the good of the overall college football picture as their goal, or do you think some of them will continue to put their own interest over the good of sustaining what a model would be to have college athletics the way that we can understand them?
Well, I wouldn't make any accusations around that. You'd have to ask others what they're thinking. But, I think part of the reason why we got to where we got to with the current playoff, and I was in the room at the time, and I was the only one of the commissioners, the A5 commissioners that was in the room, and it was kind of inspiring to see Jim Delaney and Mike Slive sort of lay down their weapons and say, okay, I'm gonna live with this if you can live with that. And there was a lot of give and take. And ultimately, we ended up with a 14 playoff that I think was a huge step forward. It's better than any of the predecessor structures. We have learned that larger and more access and more resources, maybe getting more networks involved with the televising of the playoff, is going to be a good thing for us and a good thing for college football in general. So, you'd like to do what you can for your own league, but we all have to kind of keep our eyes on the prize and make sure that we don't do anything that's detrimental to our conference, certainly, but we also need to be thinking about what's in the best interest of the game.
Name, image, likeness, obviously a very hot topic. How has it unfolded compared to what maybe your original expectations were?
Well, as you may know, I was co-chair of a group that was looking at a whole bunch of information and trying to put some plans in place and I guess guardrails, if you will. We were still working on it in the last week of June with the July 1st deadline looming over us, and ultimately the NCAA legal team and leadership decided that they didn't want to get sued again, so they weren't going to put any guardrails in place. Obviously, I was disappointed with that. I thought it was a mistake, but we feel like we owe our membership a little more guidance than that. But in the end, it's easy to look back now and say I told you so. But we have a lot of issues and a lot of problems and a lot of new enterprises that would have been manageable in some measure, or at least would have been better off had we put some guardrails around it. So, whether or not we can go back now and unring the bell or put the toothpaste back in the tube or whatever analogy you want to put. Obviously, we're not going to compete with state law. We have to yield to state law where it exists. But you've even seen some states that have come back and said, "Whoa, this is way more complicated than we realized," and they've deregulated their rules, and so it's very much in flux. The thing you have to remember about it, though, is that the July 1st came and went, and the sky didn't fall. We still are playing football games and basketball games. There are a few people that are highly publicized that have made big deals. But generally speaking, you look at an average college football team or a college men's or women's basketball team. There's maybe 10 or 15 kids on the football team that are making any serious money, and 3 or 4 kids on the basketball teams. And so, it isn't the end of the world that everybody thought it might be. But, with the transfer portal and some of those things, it was explicitly said in our discussions that NIL was not supposed to be arranged by the institution. It was not supposed to be an inducement for transfer or for initial enrollment. Those things were in the guardrails that we had put forth, and they're still what everybody believes, but there are no specific rules that prohibit those kinds of things from happening. And so, there are places that have taken advantage of it, and there are places that are waiting and seeing, and there's everything in between. And we still there's a lot of evolution in the NIL space that's going to take place in the years ahead.
Bob, there's the Sun Belt Conference is losing teams to the American Conference, and some are trying to get out others, and there's schedules, and now there's lawsuits or whatever. With what is happening with the teams joining the Big 12, Brigham Young is independent. They have their own timeline. But the others with UCF, Houston, and Cincinnati, how has that gone about their timeline? And is that going pretty smoothly with what they want to be able to do to get to your conference as soon as possible?
Well, in BYU's case, they do have a conference that they have to extricate themselves from. They're in the West Coast Conference with Gonzaga and St. Mary's and Santa Clara and those guys. And so, they've wanted to be respectful of the WCC, and they have been. But they've told us they're going to come in July of 23. The others, all three of them, have said not later than July 1st, 24. But they all are working with the AAC to get themselves here on July 1st of 23. And so there are stipulations for extrication that involve money and waiting periods and notice periods and those kinds of things. And so they're working their way through it. We just made a visit to we being my senior staff and I at the conference to BYU last Thursday and Friday. And they're going to be a terrific new member, as the Baylor faithful found out last fall. They have a good following, and they do things the right way at BYU, and so it's after visiting, I'm very excited about them coming in, and I'm confident that the others will come in 23 as well. So we expect to have them playing a full schedule by the time July 1st, 23 comes around, but they still do have some things to work out with their other conference.
There has been discussion at times about super conferences, whether that ever gets to that point or not. You would then have 12. Obviously, with Texas and Oklahoma still a part of the mix, it would be 14. Do you ever see the Big 12 looking further to get to 16, or do you feel like you just need to make sure you get to 12, have everything, the dust settled before you look at that as an option?
Well, I think it's probably the latter, although, there could be circumstances that would lead us in a different direction. I think we've probably got all the change we can manage right now, but that notwithstanding, there may be opportunities down the road, and it's hard to tell where those opportunities could come from. But when we were doing the press conference for the 4 new members, I said very clearly, this may not be the last tranche of schools that we take, and so whether we would go to 16 or whether we'd go to 20, who knows? It might be something in between, but I don't know that there is a clear indication at this point in time that larger is specifically better. And there's always been a lot of talk about the super conferences, but you lose a lot when you get into the bigger alignments. You lose traditional rivals, which I think contribute greatly to in-house attendance. I think that's one of the real strengths that the Big 12 has had over the years, is we played a full round robin in football and a full double round robin in men's and women's basketball. We play each other a lot, and as a result, I think our league is strong from top to bottom. I think the Big 12 is better from first place to last place than any other of the major conferences. I think we have very good balance in our major sports. Name one where there isn't great competition, and so. Larger isn't necessarily better, but if we started to get indications that we could be helped by a larger alignment, we're certainly not going to foreclose on that at this point.
How are things going with Texas and OU's exit? I know that's got to be complicated and everything that goes on. Or are you still expecting 2025 to be that drop dead day at this point?
Well, that's what they've told us, and that's what our grant of rights would indicate. So we don't have any reason to expect otherwise. But it has its rough points. There are things we talk about that perhaps you wouldn't want departing members to be discussing with you. On the other hand, it's my responsibility to make sure that the student athletes and the coaches of those two universities get fair competition, however long they're here, and that we do the things that are appropriate in college athletics. And I take that responsibility very seriously. And so we're gonna make darn sure that they're treated properly, and that we do for them what we do for others. And that doesn't mean there aren't going to be some sharp edges, and that there aren't going to be some times where there are abrasions, but we're going to work very hard to make whatever time they have in the league as productive for them and for us as it possibly can be.
Bob, taking a look at basketball season, obviously there's been a lot of attention on the Big 12, 4 teams in the top 20 right now. Baylor, Texas Tech, Texas, and obviously Kansas as well, all in good position. And there'll be some other teams, obviously, in the postseason. You got 4 teams on the women's side ranked. Just how do you feel like hoop season has gone so far on both the men's and women's side?
Well, pursuant to my earlier comment, on the men's side, you got West Virginia at the bottom, and they've got 3 wins in the league, and Oklahoma's got 4, and Iowa State's got 5. The amazing thing about Iowa State, they I guess they're 6 and 9 in the league right now, but I think they have 9 wins over quartile 1 teams. It's really indicative of what I was talking about from top to bottom. We've got good basketball teams, and I think the same is true on the women's side. As you mentioned, we've got 4 in the top 20, and but by the way, you got a big day in Waco on Saturday with Baylor and Kansas on the women's side, and Baylor and who is it on the men's side?
Kansas women.
Kansas, yeah, those guys, yeah. So it's a big day in Waco and the Farrell Center, and that doesn't get any better than that. It's nice to have both men and the women competing for the championship.
Bob, one more thing on the TV contracts, the grant of rights. You mentioned that different conferences have different end dates. We know the ACC has a very long timeline. Do you ever, and have you ever been worried about that big, huge chunk of money drying up? Is it always going to keep going up, even with what you now have with the changes in the Big 12? Is it just always going to have a large chunk of money?
Well, it's a really good question, and it's one that we pose to ourselves and to our consultants frequently. But the one thing about it that I would say is about as comforting as anything is that live content, particularly live sports content, is kind of the coin of the realm. If you own live content, it's valuable. And there seems to be an almost insatiable appetite for it, particularly at the highest level, and we're going to continue to play at a very high level. And so, I think that while details change and some of the players change, as we've considered how we might market an expanded playoff to the broader audience, one of the indications we've got is that there are a lot of broadcast entities that would like to get into college football on a greater basis, and that would include regular season and the postseason as well. And we play at a high level, we recruit at a high level, and I think live content is always going to be really valuable. And so you never know how valuable until you get into the marketplace and start looking at how many suitors you have. Ideally, you'd like to have multiple organizations that are interested in your product. That's going to, it's going to be like any other auction that drives price. So, I feel good about where we are. I feel good about our future alignment, and we've got a little more time, but in in March of 24, we have a mandated negotiation with our current partners, ESPN and Fox, and we will either come to terms with them, or we'll end up taking it to the open marketplace. But I feel good about the content we have and the level of competition, and I think that the environment is changing. The migration from linear cable to streaming is alive and well, and yet live content's always going to be valuable.
Yeah, and when that day in late July happened, not to go backwards, but there were so many that thought there would just be a mass amount of money lost for each of the teams who remained or anyone who joined. Did you ever just believe that at any time at all, where you felt like that you were still going to end up on the other side with a really good situation for all the members of the Big 12?
Well, you don't lose big brands like Oklahoma and Texas and have no impact. It would be foolish to believe that there won't be some impact. But we went out and brought in the four best that we could find that were available. They all compete at a high level. They're big schools. They are in great areas. They are in great recruiting areas. And I just think that we did as well as we could possibly do. And there may be a reduction as a result of the inventory that Oklahoma and Texas take with them, but we're also bringing valuable content into the league, and we'll be back to 12 in a few years, and I like the 12. I think our competition is going to be as good as any in the country.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate your time again. Always appreciate your opportunity and access you give us.
Yeah, good to be with you guys, and be well, and don't get caught up in the ice.
Yes, sir. You too. That's Bob Bowlsby, Big 12 commissioner, with us. There's a lot of things that he said that we have discussed quite a bit. I know we have Max Olson. We'll discuss Max Olson some things as well, college football writer. But one of the things you heard him say near the end is something that some don't quite believe is valuable, and yet he just reiterated it when it comes to live content. I think we've mentioned that many times before, and when you have who are the new things other than the regular television networks? Amazon,
Apple TV, Peacock, Paramount,
even ESPN with ESPN Plus, they want games. Now, does that mean it's going to be SEC Big 12? No. Does it mean, like he said, it's going to be what it has been? Probably not, but it's not going to be like your head and your arms fall off and all you do is have the trunk of your body.
I just want to say hello to all the people. Hope you're having a great day that doubted the expansion reports when you were first talking about them. I want to say hello to you again, the ones that I've seen a little snipe here in the last couple months here and there about the part 2 and that being completely off the table and just totally made up and whatever else anybody wanted to say about that. That door is very much just left wide open by Bob Bowlsby. I don't know if you guys caught on to that or not.
About
a part
maybe
2.
20.
Maybe even 20. So just hello to you all that wanted to take your little pot shot here and there on expansion talk and things like that. There's Bob Bowlsby talking about it, leaving the door open to up to 20 teams. And I know he's talking and he's not saying they're going to, but just hello to you all. Nice to see you.
I think some of the other opportunities that might end up, depending on whatever happens to other places, other conferences as well, with the grant of rights and much more. And that doesn't mean he just said Memphis. That doesn't mean Bob Bowlsby just said Boise State or SMU or South Florida or whoever else you want to put in those blanks. But I do know this, that a lot of you who are watching on our YouTube channel, you heard what he said, and a lot of you have gotten on the chat room with us and discussed it. You felt like at least that door was not shut, because he could have said that, and he did not. And that doesn't mean it's going to happen maybe as soon as you want, if at all, but that door absolutely was open.
And I like that, you put all this out there last fall, and there was not like a vocal majority by any means. Like, one or two people on occasion, you see a little, I was making up stuff, or, they're whatever. And it's like, okay, well, there you have that interview right there. There's example A. And, yeah, I don't know who that could potentially be. And, look, he's not guaranteeing that there will be anything, but he's definitely not closing the door on it. He's definitely not saying that. So, that was definitely of interest. I think a lot of what he had to say was of interest, though, just kind of getting the Big 12's perspective on, a lot of different topics that we just covered there. But yeah, that's interesting, and I'm curious to see where all this goes, because as we know right now, this is a world where you can't really predict anything at any moment. So that's going to be fun to keep tracking here.
We are not done. We hope you've enjoyed our first